Wow. So I definitely learned a lot about a lot of different topics during that conversation that I thought I had a pretty good comprehension of, but after that conversation, I kind of realized that I didn't. And I definitely think that after the conversation with him, I think my perspective on how I approach my AGMs have definitely changed. Um, yeah, I think that's definitely going to change my behavior, which is amazing, right? So, just wanted to take a moment to sum up what we're taking away from that conversation because there was a lot to take away. So, let's look at what could everyone have done differently to improve this experience because that's the goal that we're aiming for here. So, let's do this across both the Strata manager and Antonio. So, let's start with the Strata manager. So I think the first point for the Strata manager has to be offer help plus information. So I think the thing that was missing with the Strata manager's communication, they provided all the information that was requested, but they didn't really do anything to support Antonio with his experience. And I think that really ties into that the second point for the Strata manager, which is being it together. So I think this is really where those two tie together because I feel like the Strata manager's mindset behind the communication was very much, well, you made the decision, don't blame me, here's all the information to prove it. Full stop. Right. But I think what the Strata manager probably failed to stop and consider was what was the experience that Antonio was having on the other side of that. So at the end of the day, when Antonio sent that email, asking, why is the cleaners not here as often as they used to be, and who approved the services to be scaled back, and why weren't the owners told? That's a pretty good indication to the Strata manager that Antonio doesn't realize that they actually voted for this, right? So just trying to understand and think what's happening on the other side of that email to understand that obviously Antonio was confused and unhappy about the outcome. I just feel like because the Strata manager focused just on information and not on actually helping with the experience, they missed that opportunity for connection. They missed that being in it together opportunity between Strata manager and owner. It would have really helped Antonio at that point, at the very beginning of the story, if the Strata manager had just come back and said, "Hi, Antonio, I understand you're a little bit confused. I think there may have been some confusion about the vote at the AGM. Just to let you know, same information that they gave, about the fact that it was voted in, etc., etc., etc. I'm happy to jump on a call and talk this through with you at any point." You know what I mean? So that Antonio felt in it together with the Strata manager. It's so important for the owner experience. And then I think the third one, the most important thing that came out of this conversation with Tim, I think really was the need for clear explanation notes. So I think, the big thing is to all the Strata managers out there, use plain language in the explanation notes within your AGM motions. So I understand now after talking to Tim, the motion has to be written in legalese. It has to be written in a way that will hold up in court. But the explanation note is supposed to be the polar opposite of that. The explanation note is the opportunity to ensure comprehension of what's being voted on. It's the opportunity to talk human to human language rather than legalese. And I think what was probably highlighted from my conversation with Tim is the importance of that explanation note really defining the impact if you vote yes and the impact if you vote no. And I think this is This is probably one of those communication activities that probably would benefit from the mindset of the random person on the street test. So when you look at that explanation note, if you were to hand that explanation note to just some random person on the street, would they be able to understand what they're voting on, what the outcome of that vote could mean for the building? And if a random person on the street can't understand it, it's probably not explaining it correctly. It's not explaining it enough. Because as Tim explained, that's exactly what Strata is. It is just a group of random people with different levels of academics and life experience and strata knowledge all thrown together. So that explanation note needs to be so simplistically written that you could hand it to anyone on the street and they could understand it. So then let's move on to Antonio. So I think the first point for Antonio in terms of what Antonio or / an owner could have done differently to improve the experience was, I think the first one has to be assume no malice. So Antonio did really go into those the communication with the strata manager, assuming that they were being tricked, assuming that something dodgy had happened. But I think it's really important as owners that we start our communication from a neutral position. And I know that's hard when you're annoyed and frustrated, but if you start a conversation with your strata manager where you're accusing or attacking, let's be honest, no one is helpful when they feel attacked. We're defensive when we feel attacked. So if we start our communication with our strata manager, always assuming that they've done something wrong or they've got, that they've tricked us or whatever, we're probably not setting a tone for a helpful response. And then I think in line with that as well, the second point I think has to be communicate your experience. And what I mean by that is paint a picture. If you yes no questions will receive yes no answers. But a story gets engagement. So use emotive words. And what I mean by that is if Antonio's email had said, "Hi, I'm really confused. You know, I don't know how this was agreed to. I'm really upset because the building's looking really messy and dirty at the moment. I'm confused. Can you help me understand?" You know what I mean? That sort of emotive words has a higher chance of that you remember the person on the other side of that email is a person too. And when we hear emotive words, we as humans have emotive responses. The chances as an owner of getting a more human response from your strata manager is to be a more human communicator to your strata manager. And then I think that kind of ties into the third point as well. Ask for options. So again, I think this one is very similar to one of the points from episode 1. I think avoiding those yes or no questions, right? Because if you're asking, can we? Or, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, they're going to answer the question. And if the answer is yes or no, that's probably all you're going to get. But ask for options. So always ask, be really clear about what you want. So at the end of the day, if you want to know what are the options, ask, can you please define, can you please clarify what are the options from this point forward? What can be done? How can this be reverted? So, you know what I mean? The what and the how and the why, they're always going to get more detailed responses rather than a question that can be answered with yes or no. And I think one of the other really big ones from this conversation is prepare for your AGM. Now, obviously, we don't know whether Antonio and the other owners actually did prepare, but I would probably guess if they didn't realize that they were voting for the cleaning and gardening services to be scaled from 120 hours down to 30, they probably didn't actually read through the pack. There's a very high probability of that. So I think a really big point for any owner coming up to their AGM is prepare for your AGM. Read the pack. I know it's big and it's daunting and there's financial reports in there, and as I said, motions written in legalese. But hopefully, after this, a lot of strata managers will now realize that they need to have clearer explanation notes, and that will help. But know what you're voting for and why. It's really important that when you walk into that AGM, you understand what the outcome of all of those votes are going to be, and that you're prepared and you know how you're going to vote. I know a lot of owners go, oh, I'll just make up my mind once I'm there. But let's be honest, it's easy to be swayed by the majority if you're not already clear on how you're going to vote. So I know I've sat in AGMs before where they ask for a vote for yes, and a couple of people put their hand up and they look around, they realize no one else has put their hand up and they put their hand back down. They've literally changed their vote because other people didn't vote the same way as them. And although that might sound like, oh yeah, but that's not a big deal, it is a big deal, because maybe those people who didn't put their hand up, they weren't necessarily going to vote no, they just didn't know how they were going to vote. So it's just really important that you prepare for your AGM. You are prepared when you walk into that AGM. And I think that really ties into the next point, which is understand the impact of your vote. So understand the impact of voting yes. Understand the impact of voting no. And if you don't understand the impact, ask questions and keep asking questions until you are clear. Because one, it will avoid a situation like Antonio and the other owners where they voted based on what they thought they were voting on, and it turns out it wasn't, and it hasn't benefited them. But also, you have the right to understand what you're voting on. Voting at an AGM is one of the biggest powers that an owner has in a strata scheme. So you don't want to waste it, right? At the end of the day, you want to be really clear what you're voting on, because if everybody in that owners corporation was really, really clear on what the outcome of their vote was going to be, then that however the vote comes, and whether you've voted yes and majority vote no, whatever, the outcome of that actually ties into the next point, which is be accountable. Don't blame the manager if the owners made a bad decision. You know what I mean? Like, the owners take a vote. And if you have owners in the building who are choosing not to vote, not come to the AGM, well, you can't really then complain about what's being voted, what the outcome of the vote is, right? Our biggest power as an owner is those votes at an AGM. So be prepared, know how you're going to vote, understand the impact of that vote, and then be accountable for the outcome. Don't blame somebody else when it turns out that you guys didn't vote in a way that led to the outcome you wanted. And I think that also comes down to another little point I want to put up, which is know how to change it. So I feel like part of preparing for your AGM and understanding the impact of your vote should actually include knowing how to change it. And what I mean by that is, when you're deciding how to vote, know if it's a one-way decision, and if not, know how it can be reversed. And I think that really became a important thing in Antonio's story, because not only did they not realize the the impact of their vote, they didn't realize that it could be, it wasn't a full stop situation. So, which I thought it was. And Tim has obviously explained that to me, that I thought once you voted something at an AGM, that's it, it's done. But if the owners aren't happy, they can actually ask to revote and revert back and all those things, right? But again, Antonio and the owners have just assumed that they can't do that. I think as part of your AGM preparation and understanding the impact of your vote, it should also be understanding if it's a one-way decision and how you can actually convert it back and when. And so if it does turn out that that vote doesn't quite have the impact that you all thought, and let's be honest, as owners, sometimes we don't have a full comprehension. We think we know what we want, but we don't have a lot of experience with managing a building. So sometimes we're going to pick the wrong thing. But if we know that, to revert it back, we would need to contact the strata manager, have another vote, etc., etc. The minute that we all have a conversation and say we're really unhappy with the outcome of this, you can start the process. So again, it's just having that understanding and empowering yourself around the impact of your vote. And I think another little one that I want to add on the end there is speak up. And what I mean by that is I was surprised how long it took for Antonio to actually reach out to the strata manager and question why all the cleaning services had been scaled back. And I think the conversation with Tim triggered something in my brain a little bit to kind of go, we do tend to do the whole, oh, maybe people are on holidays. Oh, maybe it's going to get fixed. Maybe they already know. And I think it's that, probably talking from personal experience, but I think I worry about being a bit of a Karen, like the whinger, like always pointing out all the little things wrong around the building. But the reality is, your strata manager's usually sitting off in a building somewhere. They don't know that there's a slow build-up of rubbish somewhere. They don't know that there's a particular corner that the cleaners are not getting the cobwebs out of. At the end of the day, speak up. Reach out to the strata manager. Hey, just wanted to bring this to your attention. Let me know if you need more information. Sometimes the strata manager is going to be like, oh, wow, thanks. I didn't even know that was happening. You know what I mean? Like, it is our building. And it's okay to raise our hand and say, something's happening and I'm not happy about it. I just want to check that someone knows that it's happening. And I just think that's an important little point that came out of this. So after going through all of those, I just want to do a little reminder that a single change of behavior, so just one of those things on those lists, could have completely changed this experience. So what that means is, for all the Antonios out there and all the strata managers out there, you have the power to change this story. So try it. Pick one, try it out, jump over to socials and share how you go. And I want to remind everyone again, this isn't the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation. So we learn, we try, and we continue the conversation. And if this continued conversation across social leads to new learnings, we will put a link in the description below for an update episode. Now, personally, my learning goal from this episode is definitely going to be better prepared for my AGM that's coming up. So I really want to make sure I understand the impact of my vote. And as I said in the conversation with Tim, there are some motions in that AGM that I'm not really clear on, if I'm honest. And I wasn't going to get clear on it. I was just going to be, I was kind of, yeah, I guess I'd probably vote this way. But after this episode, after this conversation with Tim, it's become really apparent to me that I need to understand the impact of my vote, because it is it is using my power. And if I vote a certain way, I need to be accountable for that. So I'm going to spend a bit of time and figure out how do I be more prepared for my AGM. Now, I'll keep you updated on my progress across our socials. You'll see that there's already a few learning update videos that have gone live from our last episode. So, as always, hit the subscribe button so you see when new episodes and new stories are released. But mainly, thank you for coming on this journey with me. It's been really helpful to me already, and we've got so many messages from other owners that it's been so helpful for them. So thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.